That's but we're
live.
Okay. Good morning. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and it is May 22nd, and we're going to very briefly look at amendments to 928. And then we are going to hear about how the CAFO transition is going, the report, and would love to get an update about that. And recognizing that we don't have a quorum in the room right now, and that's okay because we're not making any decisions. So there we are. Okay, you're Director of Legislative Council. Welcome.
Thank you, Riley Showman, Office of Legislative Council. And so we're looking at draft 7.1 of an amendment to H 928. And this amendment is should be familiar to the committee. The first, second, third, and fourth instances of amendment updates the hunting points violations, and then the fifth instance of amendment amends some information related to the champion lands. And that is has been the intent of this committee the entire time. This amendment takes out the amendments to the PFAS. And one thing that might not be obvious from this, but it's just worth mentioning, is that the entire bill, including its amendment, will be effective on July 1st, 2026. So the whole piece will be effective on that date, and that's the amendment.
Okay.
Any questions?
I'm just going to say before.
Okay, I think you should.
Take out. Yep.
You want me to start right out where I left off, or we both think this?
I think you should probably do the whole thing again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
July 2026.
July 1, 2026.
Okay.
And I'll do
This
that before.
is something we can talk about later, but I did get a question from some other people about auto loading rifles.
Yeah, I heard down there.
Yep, you are so on top of it. That's great. Okay, never mind. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
See you before.
See you. Okay, and all right, so we are going to now to talking about CAFOs and the report. Would you all want to come up at once? Do you want to go one at a time? How would you like?
I can sit up there with you.
Sure.
I was just gonna provide a brief introduction and then I was gonna let Mira talk about the stakeholder.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So, hi, I'm Abby Pajak, ECO Program Manager.
Kevin Burke, Director of the Watershed Management Division. Nice to be here. Yes, good to meet you. And we're joined with, maybe we can let Mira introduce herself.
Sure.
Hi, Mira Downey with the Consensus Building Institute.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll just give a brief intro. So the report was submitted in response to the charge in Act 67. And I can go over briefly what we are sort of discuss more in detail about the ask for stakeholder and public input on 5 main issues that were outlined as the establishment of the CAFO program compliant with the Clean Water Act, how to align the CAFO program most effectively with existing water quality programs administered at the Agency of Agriculture, how to create long-term regulatory clarity, including options to remain split between both agencies or consolidate to A&R, the identification of technical and financial resources needed to support farm compliance, and also the ask to consider other regulatory approaches used in other states, such as New York. So A&R coordinated with the Agency of Agriculture and contracted with Consensus Building Institute, CBI, to facilitate the stakeholder meetings and represent the stakeholders in reporting their recommendations. I do want to acknowledge the immense amount of time and effort that went into coordinating these meetings and attending these meetings by all parties. Especially stakeholders who participated openly and honestly. It was honestly a great experience to be a part of. So I'm going to let Mira outline the stakeholder and public input. So because that is the point of view that the legislature made it very clear that they wanted to hear from. So I think we should emphasize that part of the report. After she talks about the stakeholder recommendations, I'll be happy to talk to you about A&R's portion of the report or answer some questions on the status of the CAFO program at this time.
Great.
So Handing it over to Mira, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Fabulous. I am in part standing in for my colleague Pat Field, who is the main facilitator from the Consensus Building Institute. We helped both in the group and then also facilitate the meetings over the course of about 3 months. We had around 10 meetings, including additional side meetings with environmental petitioners, the planning team, which consisted of the Department of Ag and Department of Natural Resources. On the group, we had about 18 or so farmers initially invited, 10 technical service providers, and around 5 environmental petitioners. We decided to start the process primarily just with agency representatives and farmer representatives to give farmers a bit of a chance to understand the issue at hand, the scope of what they're being asked to do, and then time for them to speak amongst themselves about what they might like to get out of the process and recommend. Then over the course of the process, we invited in the environmental petitioners to participate and incorporate their perspective. I'm going to go a little bit into what resulted from those long and well-planned meetings. So the typical format of the meetings had time for presentation, usually from the Department of Natural Resources or from a state that we had asked to do a guest presentation about their program. And then we held time for discussion between farmers by themselves and then farmers with department representatives. So I think of abundant importance was the emphasis from the group on an ongoing stakeholder group to advise the implementation of the program. They suggested having like a limited size that was representative of different perspectives, but also effective and able to give contribution that helped move the process along. There was interest in the group primarily because they felt like it was an important place to have touchstones, milestones, check in on the progress of implementation and provide feedback. Along with that, there was a lot of emphasis from farmers about the technical and financial assistance required to implement the program. There was a feeling that in order to have a robust program that protected clean water in the state of Vermont, that would require support for capital funding, flexibility on compliance schedules, support with nutrient management plans, and engineering assistance that they felt was not adequate at the moment. I think of particular interest is where they came to on the long-term regulatory structure of the program. They did not reach an overall consensus, but agreed to this 5-year timeline that would have milestones and checkpoints about how it was going. So to pull up actual wording from the final report, but some stakeholders felt like they were not in a place to fully say that all responsibility should go to the Agency of Natural Resources and wanted to evaluate the process at the end of the 5-year timeline they had outlined. Other stakeholders felt strongly that the 2-permit program would cause redundancy and duplicate efforts, and felt that it would continue the lack of clarity between the 2 entities. And then I think there's another cohort that just kind of wanted to have more information and make a determination once they had more information on how the program was going.
I think we have a question in the room. Go ahead.
Is there a written report or something we can refer back to for this meeting? And how many people by stakeholders and farmers are actually in attendance?
Typically in attendance at the meeting, farmers and environmental issues like rounding around 20 or so.
20?
Yeah.
Different farms, obviously.
Yes, and we have concise meeting notes and summaries from each of the meetings we held that I believe are available on the CAFO website. The full report, I think, has also been submitted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, if you have part, please carry on.
No, just one other thing I think is important to emphasize is I think there was a strong sentiment amongst farmers that the lack of clarity and roles between the two departments made it incredibly challenging to know how they were not in compliance, and they really were seeking more guidance on what it meant to be in compliance, how to be in good standing with the state, and consistent communication about what to expect from inspections and how to know that an inspection had gone well or what they needed to do in order to be in compliance.
So in addition to this, thank you, Mara. In addition to the stakeholder report that Mara just outlined, A&R provided a portion of the report that was required. I think I'll kind of just like briefly run through. It starts about page 8 if you're looking at the physical copy. Recommended statutory amendments or other changes related to the implementation of the CAFO program. We structured our proposed changes and our overall approach around stakeholder recommendations and feedback wherever possible. Recognizing that the regulatory structure will need to evolve to meet the Federal Clean Water Act expectations, including the follow through on as outlined in our T-delegation petition and our conversations with EPA, submitted in our corrective action plan. So, you know, and I also just want to acknowledge that Vermont farmers have made significant efforts and investments to comply with the regulations in Vermont. And this is an overarching indication that the regulatory structure needs to be tweaked a little, not that, you know, farmers are, you know, the goal is to help farmers successfully achieve compliance with these new standards as the regulatory system changes. So I just want to say, A&R is looking at our own lane and what we can do to build this program and support farms and advocate for what they need. So the first item that A&R put in the report was funding for production area improvements. Mira talked about that. To meet the Clean Water Act requirement for production area standard, it will require significant capital investment.
So I'm looking at the report. What page are you on?
Oh, well, there aren't pages.
Oh, okay, no worries.
But it's, I would say, I think it's, I'm remembering, it's a page 8.
Oh, yeah, you know, I've got it.
Thank you. So it's like A&R's portion of the report, section 1, funding production area improvements.
Okay.
And so there are some specific,
Oh, I see.
to issue a discharge permit, you have to assure that everything is done to prevent the discharge up until a storm event. And so sizing of your infrastructure, collection of all waste, these are federal requirements. This is the floor. You can build above and beyond that, but that is a requirement. And when we brought in other states to look at how they managed that, there were differences, and we started to work on some analysis of the costs. And you know, a lot of these items are in LFO MFO rule already. However, there is work still to get to compliant production areas. And so the stakeholders mentioned strongly in their report, and we're saying it again, work funding is going to be necessary.
So work to get to the EPA.
Sorry, say that again?
To the federal level standard.
Yeah, so the federal provides like a floor, but to issue a discharge permit, you have to meet an effluent limitation, right? And so for CAFO, it's designed to a storm event. So it's a containment of all waste. So if water passes through production area and is dirty, it's not diverted, that would need to be collected also. And so we know, A&R knows that we have to figure out, and Vermont is going, the regulatory structure is gonna have to figure out what does that mean? What are some innovative practices we can bring in? How can we divert water? What does it mean to collect all this water? But the federal floor is very clear that it's collection and treatment to a specific standard. And so, for instance, if we have funds in the state that don't have collection under the federal rule, they would need to be collected. And so that's just what the federal rule says. And so that is part of what we're working on, but it will cost money, and so we're just trying to, again, this was the process for the stakeholders to advocate what they needed. And ANR to emulate that and say, yes.
So is AR gonna expound upon the standard of federal level or?
I don't think our intent is to go beyond, and that was expressed by the agricultural communities to not go beyond, but. It's worth noting that the Agency of Ag LFO MFO program has some things in place that are beyond the federal standard already, such as winter spreading ban. It's that nature, but we're looking to be innovative and flexible with the farmers. But maintain consistency with that starting point in the federal rules.
Yeah, the federal rule does not require a non-discharging farm to obtain the permit coverage, it requires discharging farms. But then the onus on that farm to operate, manage, provide records, maintain freeboard or storage capacity, those are very clear in the federal register. So we realize that it's going to take money, and that is something that we heard as part of stakeholder groups and proposed as what we imagine might need some changes for either statutory or other. Another item that ANR proposed is permit fee reciprocity. So if an MFO or LFO is subject to a permit fee, that would be mirrored for a KFO. And I think that there's language also maybe similar to that or different than that that is being proposed right now, but that was the proposal, was that the fees would be reciprocity.
They wouldn't pay, if they're MFO and LFO, but they would have been paying the fee. If they're subject to KFO because they have a discharge, they wouldn't be paying a fee twice. It wouldn't change anything for the farm. It wouldn't increase it, it would just essentially allow for one or the other.
So I want to understand the reciprocity here. So it's reciprocity between what? Is it between AFM and no?
So I think it's changed since the report was submitted. So the report was submitted for reciprocity. So
Oh.
AFM's permit fees were
Yeah.
not being collected, that KFO would propose this. And that was how, and I also believe last night there was some language that is going, and I'm not entirely sure what it says, and it might speak more to what Kevin said, that you would pay one or the other. What is in the medium CAPO general permit right now, which has been finalized, is if you have a medium CAPO general permit, you would not also need a medium MFO, sorry, it's hard.
Oh,
But
okay.
you would also need an MFO permit and you wouldn't pay both. So I
Gotcha.
think that's already, at least for the medium farm,
Mhm.
in,
And so. But then, so that's if you were paying a CAFO fee, is that right?
if you were required to get it, or if you got a medium CAPO general permit, you would not also need a farm.
Right, okay.
So you
That
would
makes
just see one, but this is in addition to that, if the fees were waived
Right.
for agricultural permits, then they could be
Mhm.
considered to be waived for.
Okay, so forgive me for. This is just my, exposing my ignorance here, but to be, I mean, if you're a medium CAFO, that I would imagine that fee would be more than medium. Than the regular medium CAFO. Or do you think they would be the same?
I think right now they're in us.
Okay. Okay. Thank
So who has the enforcement authority? Is it ANR or is it AF?
For the discharge permit, it would, right now, it's with ANR, and non-discharge permits sit at the agency.
And so what's the feedback? I mean, if a farm has a problem or question, how do we get that information so everybody understands that there was a problem?
A problem meaning they think they have a discharge, or?
Well, the problem with a systemic problem or funding problem.
Sure. Well, I mean, I hope that is, again, that's a really good indication that an ongoing stakeholder group is important. I think that's farmers can give that information, at least in the stakeholder group that we participated in. There was a lot of that open discussion and sort of advocating for needs. I often tell farmers, you can always call me if you have an issue, they don't love to call a regulator. So I don't often get my phone to ring, but there are, we do provide, even so agriculture has a lot of technical assistance, we can provide like, links and contacts to them. So depending on who calls whom, hopefully they get sent either to our shop or to agency of ag, get routed.
Who are the stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders?
Who participated in the stakeholder group? It was a group of farmers, it was technical service providers, it was environmental groups, the agencies, and then a lot of the public and other partners in Vermont, so natural resources.
There's a list.
Yeah, there is a, oh, yeah, actually, it's at the back,
Okay.
yes.
And just to add what Abby said, even since the stakeholder process concluded, we've been meeting with the agency of ag to work on coordinating. And scheduling joint inspections, training, making sure that we're all on the same page. So that there's a flow of information and coordination for the farmers. Challenge for this interesting.
Let's keep going.
Okay, so the next item that we discussed was good standing and access to funding. It was that we would try to align that as best we could. The Agency of Agriculture has some great language when it comes to how a farm is defined as good standing, and so we proposed that that language could also be extended to CAPO farms, and so we provided some sort of parameters around that. We also said the proposal that we heard from farms is that they need time and that there needs to be education and outreach as a component of this. And so we're ANR's proposing right now, we're working internally to sort of develop our enforcement framework, working more towards compliance and coming into terms of the permit rather than, emphasizing county compliance. So that is something we're working on. We're increasing our internal processes and working with the agency of ag, trying to figure out some of that. But we heard that clear from stakeholders and we great, the state's kind, the state's.
So what's the time frame for compliance? Because, we're getting into planning and then harvesting.
Well, it's not a single year, so we're not gonna bump into crop season, and it's gonna, honestly, I imagine the compliance schedule is being 5 to 10 years for some of these farms based on the amount of funding that we have available. It really depends on the actual fix for this farm, each farm is every farm.
So have you prioritized the farms as depending upon the problem they have?
So right now, what we're doing, what we heard from the stakeholders is that we really need to, while we've seen at the program, focus on individual fixes. And so although we may require a fix to meet that effluent limit standard, so a structural fix would require potentially an engineering sign off rather than, oh, well, I brought the fix on and point of discharge. So we're basically saying while we develop the parts of the program that weren't ongoing already, so the permitting and the rulemaking, that we would work with farmers one by one to figure out what their individual needs are. So, I'm not sure if I totally answered your question, but, we're not going to be requiring right after that people to get compliant.
Just concerned about penalties or
Yeah.
fines if they don't meet the.
That's primarily not going to be the focus, but really, there might, if there is discharge discovered, for example. If there's an opportunity to work with the farmer to address the issue. Because we're gonna also be standing up rulemaking and different things that will establish those standards, so this will give us time to work with them and not go directly to the heavy hand. There might be instances, I think we always have to reserve the option of going to enforcement if we don't have a particular operation being receptive to what it is that needs to be done to correct water quality issues.
I didn't forget one other thing in the federal rule, to be defined as a CAPO, a small farm would need to be designated as a significant contributor. And so we don't have that defined for Vermont right now, and so in this interim period, and our CAPO program is not proposing to go out and inspect small farms, nor would we require a CAPO permit for small farms at this point. That's something that we're trying to figure out right now with our internal structure. How do we, if there is a discharge on a small farm, what can we do? How do we balance everything that CAFO is now, looking at? Because when we looked at other states, 300, we took dairy and above is very clear. CAFO, for some states, it's self-reporting, like if you're 300 or certainly 700, you need to report and get a CAFO, yes, permit and PDS permit. That's not where Vermont is right now, it's but medium and large farms, it's more. It's easier to define a farm with a district, which is CAFO. For small farms, you need that significant, and we don't have that yet, so.
Working product.
We're not going to be inspecting small farms right now. Small farms in Vermont are regulated in excess of the federal rule already under the RMPs, and so we're not proposing additional.
I think it's worth noting, though, if there was a problematic discharge or somebody reported a discharge from a small farm, we would respond,
Yes.
investigate, and find out what needs to be done for the record.
So if I can clarify, so if I am hearing you correctly, in other states, an automatic CAFO permit is necessary depending on like the number of
Yes,
animals, let's say, that you have.
Yeah.
But we're not, Vermont is not defining it that way.
we
And there's not motion to go in that direction. It's really just about like, there's a discharge. Or no,
depends on how you define point source. There's some case law that indicates even a large farm would need a discharge in order to be required of the federal to get a CAFO
Okay.
permit.
okay,
However, state statute and state rule and the other areas that we looked at have a duty to comply or a duty to apply for farms over certain. That's not how Vermont is.
Okay,
considered
okay.
right now. Yeah,
it's interesting,
yep.
okay.
Yeah, there is a section in this report that talks about what we learned from the other states. We looked at 2 non-discharge programs, New York and Maine, and then we looked at 2 NPDES, Wisconsin and oh gosh, Minnesota. And yeah, so it was very interesting how they were all structured. And we learned a lot about standing up our own to get the compliant program for sure. It was really interesting. So, extra reading, there most of it. And again, as Mira pointed out, the stakeholders sort of reserved their decision on, the regulatory structure until they really want to see what the CAFO program looks like. There's a lot of technical standards for design that will be required, and those are the items that we need some flexibility around and we need some consensus on. And they wanted to see what, obtaining a CAFO permit would look and feel like before they said, yes, let's all go over to a CAFO permit, which is totally understandable. So we are setting forth a realistic timeline for CAFO rule and program development. We are working on the individual permit template and application, and we're gonna have that for the July 1st deadline. It's a little cart before the horse because we don't have the rule and all these technical standards figured out. But it is our best attempt at what an individual permit would look like. We also have the CAFO general permit that's already available. I think in 2023 it was finalized. So we do have some examples of that, but people really want to know what is my farm, my production area, what do I need to do to make a storage facility, and what's it gonna cost and how am I gonna fund? So what we're doing right now, the growth of this program is the permit development, the rulemaking, and hiring on new people. So that's what we're doing. Also, just real quick, we agreed that continued stakeholder involvement is imperative. And we also agreed that we need to continue to work on interagency coordination and inspection training. And I can speak to that a little if you want. We also were asked to propose an inspection timeline. I think the legislature was wondering, similar to the agency of ag, what A&R would propose for maybe statutory requirements at this point. Given the growth and the trajectory and the needs of the program, we didn't propose a staff schedule right now. Rather that through rulemaking, we would propose a schedule for permanent farms. So once farms are coming into BPDS permits, CAFO permits, we would propose a schedule similar to how other states have looked at do that. So happy to.
It's just one thing I wanted to add, that you might, I think, Abby did talk about sort of cross training with the agency of ag. But I think it's important to recognize that Abby, as program manager from CAPO, has 20 years of experience from working with the agency of ag. So we're thrilled to have her leading the programs. She brings a lot of experience training for her staff.
That's great.
So any funding for grants for farms?
There is funding. There's capital funding, there's, funding through the NRCS. There's state funding through the best management practice for capital investment. There's a lot of really great funding for crop management, equipment. There's so many good, funding sources. I think something that is going to be talked about more and more is how do we fund these expensive capital improvements, and that is, above me. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yes.
Before you leave, Senator, put in a plug. Jared Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee. So Lake Champlain Committee, myself, Conservation Law Foundation, and Vermont Natural Resources Council were stakeholders. And so I participated in the stakeholder process. It was a great process. We had great discussions with the farmers, particularly when the agencies weren't there. The farmers opened up a little bit more, and we had some great discussions. I think it's the agencies, but they were good conversations. We have not, with all of this, haven't had a chance to really digest the report per se. We're gonna do a letter at some point on the record, like we're talking about with CLF, but S 323 is coming back to you. It is on the notice calendar in the House today. It has language in it to extend the CAFO stakeholder group. And it also has language in it to, for A&R, giving A&R authority to hire this third-party consultant to conduct the inspector trainings. These are both things that the farmers want to do. One for, so there's consistency, like I was saying, consistency among inspectors, but the stakeholder group is really important going forward. It was important to hash out some of these details, to get to some common areas between the enviros and the farmers. And the plan is to keep meeting quarterly, hopefully starting in fall. It is, you look at the makeup of it, it is very farmer heavy. That is deliberate. We had some, why was there even amounts of enviros and farmers? Well, the point is to keep talking to the same group of farmers going forward. So we meet quarterly, hash out, hear about problems, this, that, and next thing. I worked on the language with Representative Nelson closely, who's also a stakeholder. So good questions for him as well, the senator. It was a great process. Looking forward to keep working with the agencies as we go forward. So I just wanted to put in a quick plug that when you see that language come back to you, well, God knows when, maybe this afternoon if they start taking things up off the notice calendar. So I'm trying to put in my plugs as quickly as I can for that language.
Okay.
All right,
And thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Sorry we didn't have more folks here. This is very helpful. And thank you for all the work that you're doing on this. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Thank
super.
you.